Então vamos dar início aos trabalhos da tarde.
Are we on? Yeah. Good. Welcome back after a little strengthening, a little experience of being fed and loved. Love and food is closely associated from when we were small. So it still resonates with something nice, you know. And we need love in so many ways. I actually even like to think sometimes when you take a breath, it's the Creator, your Creator, that loves you and gives you another moment to live, constantly keeping us alive. The very fact that we are here is an act of love from the Creator. He wants us here. If we can remember that every moment in the here and now, it can feel very good. If we think, why am I here? It's because somebody loves you and wants you to be here. It's a nice way to think about it. So welcome back to the second part of this challenging, mysterious journey into the mystery of marriage, the difficulties of marriage and how to survive and get out of it and save the love. I mean, get out of trouble, not the marriage. I will speak a little bit here first, like half an hour or something more. And then I would move into question and answers, and whatever I haven't lectured on, I will talk about in response to your questions. I think that's more exciting, gives more energy. So we will soon do that, and I hope you have questions for me. I have talked about anger, I've talked about blame, and I have talked about how much anger and blame is opposed to what angry and blaming people want, namely love in the marriage. So we need to find a way to get out or move beyond the anger. And so I'll take a close look at one erroneous assumption about anger in marriages, because most people don't like the anger. They know it shouldn't be there. So they will blame the other person by saying, it's the other person who makes me angry, right? Yeah. It's not me, I'm not an angry person. No, it's the other person making me angry. And many people experience it that way. For example, when you ignore me, when you abandon me, when you ridicule me, when you don't answer me and walk away, that you make me angry. Almost makes sense to say it that way. Everybody buys that logic, but it's wrong. That will be one of your surprises for the afternoon. Mm-hmm. And to find out why that is wrong can be one of the most important, effective means of breaking the power of evil in conflicts. So I usually ask my clients when they say this, the other one makes me angry and all that, I ask them, do you remember what was your very first response when you became angry? I mean, what did you feel? Perhaps just a split second before you flared up with anger. Many people draw a blank here to begin with, or they can only see nothing. I was angry. It came right away. But with a little help to some simple introspection, most people will be able, sooner or later, to realize that the very first reaction is not anger. Something quite different, actually something very vulnerable, such as hurt, rejection, a sense of rejection, or humiliation, sadness, helplessness. In other words, a flash of pain right in the middle of deep woundedness. But because this pain is associated with so much vulnerability that it's almost impossible to endure, then one can escape the pain by quickly moving into another emotion, such as anger or resentment, which is directing the attention outward towards the other person, away from myself where the hurt and the pain is. So you can see, when we look at it, when we do this analysis, we can see that one of the primary functions of the angry mindset is to be a cover-up for pain. Is that new to you? Think of it that way, for some of you? But this move into anger is a change of focus I am responsible for. It's not the other person that makes me do it. So now we can rephrase what I said before about the other one makes me angry. The other person can hurt me, yes, but not make me angry. My anger is my own full responsibility. So the conclusion is, if you're in an intimate relationship, your vulnerability and pain cannot be avoided. But your anger can, if you want to. And how can I avoid the anger then? Well, from what I've said, only in one way. By staying with the pain inflicted on me, embrace it, and experience it. By that I mean not thinking about it, not analyzing it, but experiencing it, feeling it in my body, heart, and soul. And we already have a very good word for this, which is called suffering. So we must stay in the suffering and then react from there. I'm not talking about we should just be a passive doormat and be miserable and suffering if the other one is angry with us. We should definitely react. But we have to first be able to center ourselves in the suffering. Then we can think more clearly about what's going on and make more constructive reactions. If we act like this when we've been hurt, then we hurt back. The quick angry response is vindictive. And then we have the conflict running, escalating. So this analysis reduces one of the big problems we as human persons have to deal with, maybe the biggest problem of the human race ever, that of how to overcome destructive anger that's going rampant all over the place, right? We now reducing that to another serious problem that may seem even worse. We must embrace the suffering on us and stay with it without becoming resentful. Well, Peter, that's easier said than done, you may say very humbly. But I say, no, it's worse than that. It's impossible. If we have to do it by our own power, as the human, selfish persons we are, it's almost impossible not to flare up with anger or shut down in anger when we have been wronged. So you can now see that it begins to become clear that the relational mess we have the power to create for ourselves and those we are involved with, at the same time is something we cannot resolve ourselves if this staying with the pain is the only solution. Let me share with you one more observation from my work that will help you shed light on this dilemma. Okay. My clients, of course, always come because they're hurting, they're in pain. But gradually it dawned on me that it is not the pain as such that is the problem, the worst problem in the suffering. It's the experience of being alone with it. This is another hugely important principle. That's the worst part of it, being alone with it. And why is that? Why is that so hard? Because it's not good for man to be alone. And that's why the Creator created us, male and female, that we together can form a unit, be each other's helper in bridging the existential gap of loneliness that we find in the original solitude. And that is very beautifully and clearly outlined in the theology of the body. So you can see, if the marriage which was given to man, because it's not good for man to be alone, if that breaks down, man is plunged into the abyss of loneliness that is not good for man. Well, it's just not good. It's bad. Bad. I've been a little intrigued by this expression, it's not good for man to be alone, because it sounds so harmlessly low-key. Like, oh, things could be better. It's a little boring to be here alone. Would be nice to have someone to chat with now and then. It's not good for man to be alone. No, it's really, really bad. To be alone for a man is like almost dissolving, disintegrating, because we are created as social beings, and we only come into being by relating to other person. No I without a you. It's profoundly important. There's a German philosopher, Martin Buber, who has written a lot about the I and the you thing, and done beautiful work in this place. So to fully experience us as isolated beings is like staring into a big black hole. Therefore, in relationships, when all of a sudden the love connection breaks down, and this huge abyss of loneliness opens up in front of us, it's a spontaneous survival mechanism for us human beings to grasp for whatever means we can get a hold of to cope with this terrifying fear of losing one's existence. And as I've shown, blame-based marital fights present them as an opportunity to escape this existential emptiness. And fighting can affirm one's existence. When we're angry, when we fight, we feel I'm here. And in three ways, actually, that I like to put this way, almost like in a Cartesian way. When you say, I fight, therefore I am. I fight with my spouse, therefore I'm married. She also fights with me, therefore we form a union. Actually a very passionate one. So we can see, we do experience being together in a certain way, that way, but negatively in a twisted way. But it's better than nothing. The word nothing taken in its most literal sense. Nothing, emptiness, black holes. Yeah. So if we are to embrace this pain in order to avoid the anger, can you see that? To avoid the anger, we have to enter into the suffering and embrace the pain. And we can't do that alone. We need a helper to do it, that can tolerate all this pain without becoming angry. And so far, only one person has been able to face all levels of raw, concentrated evil in this world and pass the test of responding with love instead. Do you know what I'm thinking about? It's sort of hanging in the air, right? Yeah. And here I refer to one of my most influential teachers, Frank Lake, that I mentioned, an Anglican minister and psychiatrist, who inspired me very greatly by pointing out how Christ, in his passion, from, the betrayal first, and then the false indictment, and he was totally innocent, Then we have the abandonment by his closest friends, the mocking by his enemies, excruciating physical torture, the death on the cross, experiencing abandonment even by God himself. Here we have the whole scale, all aspects of human suffering possible. So he has the potential to be in all that terrible stuff without becoming negative. So if we can't do it on our own, we shouldn't feel bad about it. He knows that. That's why he says, I'll help you with it. I'll help you pick up your cross if you agree to not respond with anger. Evil in all its might has one weakness. It can only thrive and persevere by igniting more evil in response to itself. Right? And we notice that not one split second in Christ's affliction does he return evil with evil. Have you seen Mel Gibson's movie? Some of you? The Passion of Christ? Yeah. It beautifully illustrates what then, how his the torturers get more and more uneasy when they see Christ receiving it like a lamb. They had never seen that before. So they upgrade the torment, they become more wrong, more evil, hoping they finally can make him curse and spit and condemn them. And if he had done that, they would just have said, ha ha ha, you are the Son of God, you're just like one of us. But he didn't. And that blows my mind. Because none of us could do that. But by that he defeats evil on its own grounds. Evil did not make him evil and capitulated. This is one of the great, there's a lot of things going on the cross, but this is one powerful thing that we can use in psychotherapy, in marital counseling, even if people don't believe in the Christian. And we have to find ways to support people in embracing the pain, and if they have a religious conviction, we can draw on that too. If they don't, then we will try to support them in feeling the pain, which they can feel if they don't feel alone with it. Then we step in there for the Lord. So sometimes I have the picture, I'm holding Christ in one hand here and my client in the other one, then I can handle being in those very dark areas of suffering where I otherwise wouldn't go in and didn't do before my conversion when I understood this. Since then, I've never been afraid of anybody coming in with a pain that God doesn't know through Christ. Before then, I took on too much of the pain myself, and I also got sick physically. I got ruptured appendicitis. I worked too hard and stuff. I took it on too much. After that, I can just pass it on there. That is very, very great to be able to do that and just listen to my client's pain, not having to feel that I have to fix it and carry it all. I know Christ is with me in it. And that's whether people believe in Christ or not, doesn't matter. So the final and most difficult test of love is that it will keep loving when it's not reciprocated. You see that? Keep loving when it's not reciprocated. I like then to define suffering this way. Suffering is what love looks like when it's not reciprocated. You see that? Christ is not just suffering on the cross. Well, yeah, but no, in a more mystic way, he is loving, loving, loving. The way love looks when it's not being mutually reciprocated. Okay? And then he says, if you want to follow me, pick up your cross. How can we do that? Only when we experience the company with him. As I said, the worst part of pain is to be alone with it. If you feel somebody else, just one other person understands your pain, it's amazing what we can tolerate. in counseling, you can sometimes help people understand or open their hearts to the understanding that Christ is suffering with you right now, feeling abandoned by your spouse or your parents or whatever it is. Christ knows what it feels to be abandoned by your loved ones. He knows what it feels to be accused of something you haven't done, the unfair truth. He knows it all. And many clients, I noticed after many years of counseling, always said, nobody knows how I feel. It took me many, many years of counseling before I understood that was the problem. That's why when I started doing groups, workshops, had people sit and talk about the pain, they discovered there were actually other people who had the same way. Powerful, powerful way of working with people. But to have this dawn on you that God himself steps into the mess you're in. And it's another important principle, theological, but very important. Because many will say, why does God allow all this evil and all this pain and suffering? That's not fair. And he created the world and gave us free will, so he knew we would mess it up, and now we have a rotten world and it's going to hell, and he's just sitting up there in heaven and listening to sweet music and whatnot. This is not fair. And there's a good point in that. But the way I understand the answer is God says, yes, you have a point. I knew it would go wrong. But I could not create you without free will if love should be possible. Love has to be a free gift. But I can guarantee you one thing, that I will come down to earth, become a person myself, and expose myself to the worst possible consequence of the creation I have set in motion. So that you should never be alone, no matter where you end up. That's loyalty. And that's love in its summit. To want to suffer or die for the person you love, as Christ says too. There's no higher love than to die for a friend. Put it down, which he is showing. So in that way, Christianity, the cross, becomes the summit of love, the fulfillment of love. So, aided by Christ, sometimes through a pastor, a priest, or a psychotherapist, or whoever can be in that space with the person, we can talk more about how we do that in the counseling session, but just so you get the principle, has a solution that it becomes possible to embrace the suffering and not turn it to anger or hatred or resentment, because then we just dig the hole deeper. So we have to stop the conflict somewhere. It takes two to create a fight, but only one to stop it. Only one to stop it. If one sincerely on the level of the heart does not reciprocate the evil, it cannot continue, just like Christ in the cross. I remember a man who was listening to my talk about this, and he came up to me and said, I really like what you said there, that one shouldn't respond with anger. And my wife is mad at me and she yells and scolds me, and I say nothing. And I said, well, what do you feel then there? Oh, I'm angry. I don't say anything. And she's about going out the roof. So you have to understand, it's not just about shutting up. It's worse, it's more difficult than that. It's about getting the anger out of the heart. Because hearts in marriages communicate. The two shall become one, and when we are married, we are very close. So you cannot keep your emotions secret from the other person. The other person, in one way, reads your heart, disposition. Many people have had a hard time understanding that too with me and say, well, when I hear how frustrated a husband is with his wife or something, but she doesn't know, really, I never tell her. I say, you can be sure she knows, or she can feel it. So spouses do read or react to each other's heart. In kids, they read it completely. You cannot deceive them. They look right through you as an open book. And sometimes we don't like them, so we get angry with them. That's another subject, parenting. I have a lot to say about that too. So quitting the fighting by embracing the suffering is the way to go. Still easier said than done? Yes, it is. But now it can be done. No more excuses, right? Now you know what to do. But of course, when suffering strikes, we can be so overwhelmed by it that we forget all what I've said here about staying in the pain. We flare up, we get angry, and so forth. So we also need to know, what do we do when we have been angry? Because I don't want it to sound like that we are terrible sinners when we do flare up with anger. What I'm saying is very hard to do, and none of us can do it. But what we need to know is, where do we want to go? We need a vision for where we want to go. So when I say anger is never okay, or being hurtful is never okay, I mean that's the vision we want to go by. So we know what to do when we have failed. Because when you have flared up with anger, then it takes maybe a couple of hours before the adrenaline comes down, and then you relax. Right in the moment you were provoked, you didn't have a choice. It was just, boom, you blew up. So we can say, okay, it's not the worst sin that you got angry, you said many dumb, stupid things to the other one. But later on, when you calm down, you can begin to think again. And then you can think, well, I know this psychologist, Dr. Peter from Denmark. He said we shouldn't be angry. But this time, she was really nasty. So this time it was okay. I said, there we say, it's never okay, never okay. That's where it's important to have that commitment. It's never okay to be. So you there can go back and say, I'm sorry. For my part, what I did was wrong. Even though the other one was a jerk or whatever, doesn't matter. You can apologize to clean up your own acts with the Lord and your conscience and with the other one. And then you can try to explain the suffering that was happening in you. If you can do that in a non-accusatory way, which is also a little difficult. But that is very important to know what to do when you have failed. So the big problem is not that we sin or make mistakes, very important, not to God either. The big problem is, how do we react when we have realized we have done something wrong? And we don't try to justify it or blame the other person, maybe do it and all that. No. My little booklet on reconciliation is out there. Will explain more about the steps of how to reconcile. Okay. Do you need just a minute to take notes or digest this? Just 1 minute. Like to explain a little more about the 0 point as the last thing before we go into question and answers, or questions and questions. You know, I mentioned earlier that we all enter into relationships primarily in order to be loved, secondarily in order to give love. Not because we are out there to exploit the other person, but it's because that our human ability to love does not measure up to our human need to be loved. Our need to be loved is greater than our capacity to give. But despite that, relationship can function seemingly pretty well, periodically at least. It's like we take turns of taking care of the other. Sometimes husband and down, and wifey is up, and then she can take care of him and nurture him, and then he's up again, and she feels affirmed she's important to him. And sometimes wifey is down, and then husband is up and can take care of her. And as long as there's a reasonable balance between give and take, we don't really worry too much about it. but plug along. But you can see there is an instability involved in this, because what if both are down at the same time? And that will happen sooner or later. Sometimes already during courtship, before marriage, sometimes many years into the marriage. It will happen that both are down with a strong need to be loved and comforted, instead at the same time. And then there's nobody there to give anything, which is what I call the 0 point. And I really believe understanding this, the 0 point, and being comfortable with it is a golden key to crack the nut of much marital trouble and defeat many divorces. Because this is where divorce gets tempting. When you get into the 0 point and all of a sudden see, oh, here I don't get what I need, so I must find somebody else and give me what I need. Totally forgetting that I can't give it either what I want. So who is going to begin when both parties are down? Good questions, right? Let's look at Jeff and Linda. I'll give you a case now. He's working with seriously mentally handicapped, a very demanding job. He comes home, he's emotionally drained, he sinks down in front of the television. His wife is also a bit drained from working with people all day. She's a physician, and she feels bothered when she sees him doing this. She really wants to be loving and understanding and tries to hide her dissatisfaction. All the while she's boiling with irritation inside. She's thinking many thoughts about what a waste of time for the relationship that he just sinks down in front of the tube when they could spend quality time together. She has a hard time with her own negative reaction because she's a good Christian person, and tries desperately to center herself so she will not be affected by his rejection and become negative herself. She is a committed Christian and very much into mindfulness and personal spiritual growth, and reads many books about all that, and believes that becoming strong and balanced enough to not be hurt by his lack of care is the way to go. She talks a lot about the problem, but mainly with judgmental and indignated references to what husband is doing. He's a very sensitive guy. He can sense her negative vibes and guilt feelings start piling up in him, while he also struggles with many thoughts that he should have the right to just TV relax when he's been on all day. But he cannot get past the guilt feelings. We can see here that the guilt feelings on his part and the accusatory attitude on her part, they enable each other, forming a demolition team that leaves no room for love to get a foot inside the door. As I've said before today, a person stuck in guilt feelings cannot love in that state. And a person dominated by blame cannot love either. And if you look at it closely in the couples you work with, where there's a blame in one person, there tends to be guilt feelings in the other person. They really work together. A person that has a tendency to feel very guilty will almost ignite the other one to blame. And a person that has tendency to blame will easily ignite guilt feelings in the other person. If somebody blamed me and I didn't react with guilt feelings because I had peace about the accusation, the blame could not continue. So blame and guilt feelings work together. It's very important to understand, because in marriages where you see a very blaming wife and a guilt-ridden husband, one would tend to think, oh, she's the bad one. This nasty, bitchy, blaming wife, and poor man, he's feeling so guilty. But he's actually also setting her up to blame, because guilt feelings is the same as self-blame. The psychodynamic of guilt feeling is anger directed at myself. Guilt feeling, I'm angry at myself. Anger is the other one angry at me. So you can see how they work together. It can be very helpful to know also. Now, Jeff here, he grew up, that's just what I call him, he grew up as the oldest child in a family where he had to take care of many younger siblings. He learned that his needs were not important. There was always someone else whose needs were more important than his. So he never learned to feel that he has a right to be cared for, and therefore cannot even today express such a need to the other one. Instead, he hopes in the inner quiet of his mind that she can sense his need and come and love him anyway in those moments when he has nothing to give. However, in those critical moments, she cannot, because she's needy herself. She came from a similar setting as an older sibling, and she also ended up in a profession where she has to take care of everyone else as a physician. She does see herself as a very caring person. And most people in church and in their circle of friends look at her that way too. But in her heart, there's the most vulnerable need to be attended to that comes alive only in her marriage. Because in marriages you are deeper than in friendship relationships. Many people don't understand that. Well, all my friends think I'm the greatest guy and really like me and think I'm the patient, and at home, my wife look at me completely different. So something must be wrong with my wife. Right? No, in the marriage relationship, you are on a very different level. Very different level. It's important to remember. Become very deep in ourselves in the marriage than in any other relationship. And I can explain a lot about that too if you want. But she cannot express this need. It's too much, too tender and vulnerable. I worked a lot with her on that, and she was scared to death of appearing needy because there's too much pain there. So her only option is to hope that he can sense it, what she needs, and come to her on his own initiative and give it to her without her having to ask for it. So she gets hurt, disappointed, and angry when he does not. But as I said, he cannot give it to her because he simply doesn't have it. He never himself got the very thing she needs. So you can see they both are in a spot where they both hope the other person intuitively can guess what they want and provide it. So right where she needs his affectionate, caring attention to her and her needs, right there he needs her affectionate, caring, and loving acceptance of him when he has nothing to give and just needs to take a break. And she cannot give this because she never learned it's okay to take a break and care for yourself. This is the 0 point. Two needy positions that clash in a dangerous constellation where both easily will feel very disappointed and frustrated for not getting what they felt they had a right to expect of the spouse in this marriage. Irritation builds on her end and guilt feelings on his. Not a good combination if it's love you want. I believe that this 0 point is in every marital union as a part of the existential baggage. When it shows up, we are in a sense right back to how it was in the beginning, right after the fall. Right after the fall, the full strength of our infused God-given power to love the other, as God loves, you know, was taken away while our need for unconditional love remained in full strength. You see the mismatch? Yeah. Before the fall, no problem. We could love each other in this beautiful way because we had God's Spirit in us. After the fall, we still have a need to be loved that way, but not the capacity to do it. So we should not feel, in a way, totally surprised by the fact that we cannot give something we don't have. We can only love if we have been loved first. That's why we tend up ending, well, you love me first and I'll love you. It sounds very egoistic, but it's psychologically very correct. Because we cannot give love unless we have been given it. So when the other one loves me, I give a lot. And when we fall in love, somehow this gets going. It's very interesting. Where we feel all the time we get something, so I give a lot. The other one doesn't just give me something because she's a great giver, but she feels she gets a lot. So therefore she gives. So somehow this thing got started and runs a while, but it always ends up. But it's our very nature to not be able to give without we have been giving. Even Christ endorses that. It's not as scriptural. Remember Christ says, the love I have given you, I received from my Father. And now you go and love others as I have loved you. So there's nothing wrong in not being able to love when we don't have it. So one of the keys of solution is to begin to be open and honest about it, instead of pretending that we have love to give by saying, oh, I love you. Then the other one says, I love you too. Oh, that's just what I needed to hear. More about that later. So the drama of the 0 point is that there are two needy people and no one to provide what's needed. And the most scary part about it is that we feel totally alone in it. We are thrown back into a loneliness that we thought we had overcome by falling in love with this other amazing person who were willing to promise to love us in good times and bad times for the rest of life. We really thought we had overcome the problem of existential loneliness. Now confronted with the 0 point, we are forced to realize that the marriage we entered into, hoping to avoid our existential loneliness, has failed completely. Now I've taken you solidly into the darkest pit here. If I've done my job well, you should all feel bewildered, gloomy, and hopeless at this point. And if I was into medication sales, this was a good time to announce a deal, a good deal of antidepressants. But instead, I'll show you another path out of the pit. Knowing that the 0 point is always inherently present in all relationships and may show up anytime, and understanding the dynamics of it can help couples dismantle the temptation to start fighting, to latch on to all kinds of negative conclusions about oneself and the other, such as I'm not the right one for this person, the other one's not the right one for me, and blah, 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 blah. If we can see and understand what happens here in this moment, that the other one simply doesn't have the love I need so badly, well, then it doesn't make sense to blame the other one for not giving it. And if I can see and understand that in this very moment I do not have anything to give, then I shouldn't feel guilty for not being able to give it. I cannot give something I do not have. That would be crazy to expect. In the light of these realizations, it can become very obvious that engaging in fighting and blaming about the lack of love is totally besides the mark. This is logical, psychological. And from this understanding of the 0 point, it should be clear to everybody involved, and that is very important, that this deprived state of the relationship has nothing to do whether we pick the wrong partner or not, or whether we are the wrong partner or not. At least it doesn't have to do that. Instead, we need to do what I've shown above, overcome the anger and ask for love in the right spirit. But knowing what to do and how to do it is not the same as being able to do it. So when I feel all of a sudden I need to be reminded that my wife loved me, and I think it's long since she has expressed anything of that, then I have noticed I can easily feel tempted to go and say, oh, Deborah, I love you. And then she will say, oh, I love you too. Then, that's good. But that was a little tricky, because I wasn't honest when I said I love you. I have nothing to give. I want something. I have seen that so much in counseling all the time. When one parent says, oh, I love her so much, I love him so much, he doesn't love me. That usually means, I need so much to hear that you love me. But because as good Christians, we've been taught and preached to, we shouldn't be selfish, we should be loving. We get this wrong. So the right thing for me to do is, honey, I have nothing to give. I'm totally down. I just need so much to feel that you love me. And if you can't, I mean, it's okay, I can't force you. That is opening my heart, and in most cases, she will really come. She can't resist that. One open heart opens another heart, and love starts flowing. But if I come and say, well, now I've said to you I love you, I don't know how many times, and this really long time you've shown me any affection. I mean, this is not fair. Would that inspire her to say I love you? No, it will not. So to say what we need in an honest way is actually a loving gesture. We tend that giving love is to do something, to give something, flowers, chocolate, blah, blah, blah. But to give yourself when you have nothing to give in your vulnerability is also a gift, great gift to the other one. So if we can stay in the 0 point without becoming angry, and I mean sometimes, you know, if I say to my wife, I need this so bad, I have to say, but if you can, it's okay, because what if she's also in that point? That, well, she also needs love, and you know, then we're both in the 0 point. And then we take it from there. If we can stay in the 0 points without becoming angry, then we can suddenly discover that the worst fear of all, of being alone with this king, that we don't want to get into, because last time I was experiencing that I was not being loved when I needed it the most as a little child maybe. I was alone. My parents didn't understand me. I was just screaming and I was totally alone. And I don't want to get back there. And I'm afraid of getting into that again. But in the 0 point, I can all of a sudden see the other one is in the same position. She's suffering also loss of love. We are not alone. We can see, we can all of a sudden say to the other one, to each other, oh, it's not easy to be you. And not, oh, this is very difficult to be me. It's not easy to be you. Then we are like two children alone at home. There's no parent there to love us, but not alone. And when couples can be brought to see each other pain that way, and understand it, and not feel bad about not being able to love, not feel angry with the other one for not loving, just being in this longing for love together, there is an experience of communion that is the trademark of love. The deep appreciation of that somebody is willing to be with me in this loveless spot bridges the gap and love flows at a deeper level. Yeah. The trademark of love is communion. We like to feel in the high when we are in love. Beautiful. But to be united in suffering and feel together there is actually even more powerful and very resilient. Now you're hitting rock bottom and finding love there. Then you're pretty strong. Yeah. It doesn't get worse than that. It actually can be fantastic. My shortest case on that one was when I gave this talk in Minneapolis last summer. Just a very, very brief one. There was a couple in the audience that was engaged. They were not married yet. They came up to me after the talk, I had explained about the 0 point, and said, Dr. Peter, we must tell you this. And they were beaming. I thought, oh boy, they looked like in love and stuff. And then they said, just 2 weeks ago, we hit rock bottom. It was like all love was gone. We couldn't find any feelings for each other, and we felt really bad about it. And it had been pretty fine until then, but they were beginning to wonder if they were not meant for each other. But when we heard you say it's okay not to be able to love in this way, we relaxed and looked at each other with a totally different openness and appreciation. And they were just beaming, and they were telling me this. Okay, let's go back to Jeff and Linda. If you want to hear how it went with them, then we'll quit. You remember how they were both expecting caring attention from the other at a point when none of them could provide it. And they reacted with all sorts of anger, irritation, and guilt feelings and hopelessness. Referring now, when working with Linda, I'm referring to her great focus on self-development. I asked her how she best could use the challenge she is facing with her husband to help her grow. She brings up many ideas and suggestions that all are about how she can become better at finding her inner balance, knowing very well that in this critical situation she has lost her inner peace. She speaks in general terms and only about herself. Notice there's no relational dynamic in her focus. She wants to be strong so she doesn't get irritated by this. I try to help her focus on how she best can cope in the actual moment when she is in trouble, and not think about how things could look in the future when she has grown and developed herself. It's fine to want to work on becoming more balanced in general, but the important thing is always to figure out what to do here and now when you are not in balance. I try to coach her to see if she can identify what personal needs she has in the here and now situation. It's very difficult for her to connect with those needs, very. I help her out a bit and offer to try putting words in her mouth, ask her to check carefully if what I'm going to say, if they match how she feels, otherwise she should tell me. So I say, I feel lonely and I'm longing to feel close to you. That's what she feels when he goes down in front of the TV. These words hit her deep. She comments, this is really difficult. It's too vulnerable to say that. And in her eyes you can see that the tears are pressing on to burst forth. She admits my words hit the bullseye, and then she hardly dare feel what I'm hinting at. She has spent a lifetime to cover up this vulnerability, but through careers and everything else. And then all of a sudden, piles of memory surfaces regarding all the loneliness she experienced as a child in her family origin, where she very much was missing closeness with both parents and siblings, way into adult age, a closeness she never received. She becomes aware of how much pain there actually is. She starts crying, and at the same time she feels embarrassed about this. She realizes that she does not dare communicate these authentic needs to her husband, because showing how vulnerable she are would hurt way too much if he could not or would not meet her in it. Then it's safer to stay with the blame and the disappointment, even though this means a guarantee that she will not get what she's missing so badly. But the situation would feel more under control that way. So the crying builds. Let's now look at Jeff. The hardest for him is when she is radiating critical attitude that tells him she's disapproving of him. He admits that scares him. He thinks this is embarrassing. He gets concerned that he is not good enough or afraid he will do something wrong, and then all kinds of horror fantasies come over him that their otherwise very good and close relationship will fall apart and she will leave him. To avoid making mistakes, he withdraws into himself, into a kind of waiting position, and hope that the storm and black clouds will drift away. Then when the atmosphere is good again, he will resume contact. But in the situation we are talking about, His method of withdrawing is sitting down, sinking into the TV set, where he restlessly flips channels, searching for distraction. So I work with him, trying to help him identify his needs in the critical moments. Since marital counseling, to me, is all about helping the couple communicate authentically with each other about their needs. Communicating authentically is most often communicating about very personal needs. Again, it's about helping him identify the specific needs he has in that specific situation. And I run into the same problem as with her. He has great difficulties, and this is very common, very great difficulties figuring out what his needs are, and claims he cannot feel them. These vulnerable needs are often blocked so far away that people don't even think they have them. So again, I give a suggestion to ask. I give a suggestion asking him to carefully feel my words about his inner state. I ask him, I need so much to feel that you care about me, even when I have nothing to give. These words hit him very deep, and he begins crying. He suddenly connects with his emotional history and remembers how often he had to do something in order to earn the right to be liked. He's been nice, done piles of favors for people, been helpful and caring unstoppingly. He discovered that his right to exist always has been conditioned by an obligation to be of service to others. So here's one. So the huge existential burnout and deep grief breaks through, and he sobs. Interestingly enough, he has ended up in a job where he has to take care of other severely handicapped people with special demands. So it's easy to understand how drained he is when he comes home, while at the same time feeling that he does not deserve anything from the spouse. However, this here is not about whether he has a right to need something or not. We need to go behind these fixated expectations and focus on if there is a need or not. Not whether you have a right to have it or not, that's a different issue. Do you have it or don't you? What's the reality? What's the truth? Don't look at the shoulds or should nots. You look at what actually is. And all of a sudden he discovers how much he is longing for unconditional love. Even though it's a painful dimension I take him into, it's a great relief for him to face and experience the reality the way it is and understand that it's okay to have a need to get something, even if you do not have anything to give. The challenge is to communicate your needs in an authentic and loving way and not demanding or accusatory way. We see the 0-point constellation, right where she has her deepest and most authentic need for his presence, showing interest in her and her needs. Right there, he has his deepest and most authentic need to feel that she cares about him, even if he's incapable of caring. In other words, they both need to experience love and care from the other at exactly the same time, leaving both of them empty-handed. However, now, through mindful and gentle but penetrating dialogue with both of them, I can show them clearly that they both are in the same position of emotional incapacity. And that helps them discover a structure or a meaningful pattern in the space between them that appeared chaotic and empty and cold. It is much easier to accept a difficult situation if you understand it. They both see it clearly that it makes no sense to blame the other person for not being able to give something they can't give, and no sense to feel guilty for not being able to give something you don't have. They understand each other's pain and accept it. In a remarkable peace comes over them, and they look at each other with some pain, but quietly and thoughtfully, lovingly. There's no conflict in there. It's a beautiful moment. Okay, I think it was a little more than half an hour, but I thought this was important. So, I don't know if it's a time for a break, or should we move into questions and answers? Or maybe how long are we going on? No, we'll take some questions now, I think. Yeah, let's do that. More comments? Yeah. Provocative questions are okay too.
Queres que traduza?
Sim, é o meu inglês não. Ainda há pouco falou sobre o amor incondicional.
You spoke about unconditional love.
Yeah.
Eu próprio nos meus aconselhamentos há uns anos atrás falava do amor incondicional.
Some years ago, I myself in my counseling, I spoke about unconditional love.
Yeah.
Tenho mudado para o amor sacrificial.
I have been shifting to sacrificial love.
Gostaria de ouvir a sua opinião, se faz algum sentido esta mudança no seu conceito do ponto zero, visto que ninguém pode ou tem capacidade de...
I would like to hear your opinion on this matter, on shifting, if this makes any sense or not.
Yeah.
And basically, that's it.
On sacrificial love?
Yes,
Switching from
unconditional love to sacrificial love.
To the needing unconditional love, to needing sacrificial love? No.
Because the idea is that since no one can love unconditionally, he changed to sacrificial love.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I need to know a little more what you say. I mean when you say sacrificial love. Yeah.
Tem a ver com este conceito que o Peter também partilhou.
It has to do with this concept that you shared with us.
Que eu próprio não consigo amar incondicionalmente.
That I myself cannot love unconditionally.
Como ser humano.
As a human being.
Mas que preciso de Deus ou de Cristo em mim para poder amar.
But that I need Christ or God in me to be able to love.
Yes.
E aí obedecer até ao mandamento de Deus de amar o meu inimigo.
And this way be able to love my enemy and to obey the commandment of God, to love my enemy.
Baseado também naquele texto de Paulo aos Efésios. Okay.
Okay.
Baseado no texto também de Paulo aos Efésios, do apóstolo Paulo aos Efésios.
Based on the text of
the Bible
of St. Paul to the Ephesians.
Que diz para os maridos amarem as esposas.
That says to the husbands love their spouses.
Como Cristo amou a igreja.
As Christ loved the church.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is the
idea.
This is the idea.
Yeah, I think one of the crucial steps to accomplish that is to keenly observe your lacking capacity to do so, and to be very aware of your gut, your heart, when it's unloving, and then repent that. Whenever you discover you have been unaffectionate, and you repent that, feeling the sorrow and sadness, you are sacrificing, you can say, your right to be angry in a certain way, and you enter into the suffering instead. And that is the first step of a loving gesture, I think, is to not cooperate with anger. It takes a lot of training, because while we ideally can think that we should love our enemies and so forth, I think it's very, very difficult to do so. And we should not feel bad about it being difficult. See, if we feel a lot of guilt feelings about that, we may tend to fool ourselves, to think that we are more loving from the head than we actually are here. So I think the way is to be brutally honest about our negative dispositions, totally trusting there's forgiveness for them. And I say, I do believe many Christians have been programmed a little bit too much to not dare look at their incapacity to love. So there is work to do in that area, and I think psychotherapy can help a lot to provide a safe setting where it's non-judgmental to look at your hostility, your hatred, your anger. Many of us, I do believe, has extreme heart issues with our parents from when we were small children. I think there is such an anger stored up there that's unbelievable, and many people block it off completely. And I use St. Paul's words a lot, that be angry, but sin not. Okay. And many Christians have mixed up that being angry is wrong. It's not biblical at all. But in many Christian communities, being angry is wrong. And then we're really lost, because nobody can avoid being angry. So if I'm not supposed to be angry and I feel angry, then I start feeling bad about myself. So and that's what I learned a lot in psychotherapy too, body psychotherapy, bioenergetics and stuff. I worked a lot with body therapy, allowing people to discharge lots of angry energy in pounding or hitting something while we move into the pain behind it. And we can move beyond the anger that way and find the sorrow behind it, and then be loving, at least in that way, that I will not cooperate or justify my unloving sentiments. Am I answering your question? Because there's a lot to say about this. Even emotions like hatred, I think they're very human. It's not wrong to have those things, but it would be wrong to act on them. That's why I do not say, well, if you think your parents treated you when you were a kid, go home and chew them out. I don't say that, no. That would be wrong. But let's discharge this in therapy for your own release sake, which we can do. You know the empty chair work, some of you? You can talk to an empty chair, sort of pretending you're speaking to the parent. It's immensely relieving for people to discharge the nervous system of all that anger. And they actually find themselves more loving afterwards. It's like throwing up. When you throw up, you can eat again. When you throw up hatred, you can love again. Same thing. Yeah. It's a good question. If you have more aspects to it, please ask again. There's would somebody be director of this?
Okay, thank you very much. That's a lot of attention, but I have a question. Okay, I'll try. I can speak without the microphone. Probably it's better.
Yeah, maybe that's better. Just speak loud.
Okay. I'm at this point now in your theory or model that I think there's a need for a leap of faith. So they're at this 0 point. They've acknowledged that they both need love and that probably they're incapable of giving it.
Could you speak a little louder? Or maybe use the microphone. I don't hear everything you're saying.
Sorry. I'll try again.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try it. So at this 0 point, I'm really feeling that the couple has to take a leap of faith, because they just become vulnerable. They've just acknowledged that they don't have the ability to love the other, or probably they don't have the love to give. This is, of course, a source of love, as you're saying. This is a step of love. But what if at this moment they also sense or believe that they're not able to give a second chance to the relationship, that the other person has just hurt it too much or done 2 wrongs, or is not just able to do this? What if you just come to the realization as a person that probably you would be better with another person, even if you just acknowledge this 0 points. Can this happen? One person realizes that they don't want to give a second chance, although they understood this. Do you understand?
Yes, yes.
Probably one can really understand, well, probably the other person has too many issues and they have to go through them, and I won't be able to cope with this. Is this possible to just at the 0 point understand?
Sometimes, good, very good question. Sometimes getting to the 0 point involves a lot of individual work in the marital setting. We work with both baggage, emotional baggage, getting into their vulnerable core, their need for love. We get into childhood issues in doing that. When people begin to see each other's vulnerability, they begin to understand also why the other one was so hurtful, why the other one did what they did. And if there is in this process a sincere repentance, then trust could build. And that's another very important part, the reconciliation part. You can, if somebody has hurt you a lot, and you don't want to give it a second chance, then one thing is probably pretty sure, that you don't trust that the other person won't hurt you again. And the only way such trust can be built is if you can get the experience that the other person understands the pain he has caused. This is the other person we're talking about. Not just understanding it here, but understanding it with his heart. That is true, sincere repentance. And not just saying, I'm so sorry 100 times, but actually more saying, I can see how much I've hurt you, and I can fully understand if you can't forgive me. Trust can begin to grow if you see sincere repentance in the other one. If the other one comes from a guilt feeling position, trust does not build. I don't know, does that touch on? Not quite, right? There's more to it.